It's now doing it.
Already done.
There
Okay,
you go.
brilliant. Cool. All right. All right. How's that? Can you see?
Very good. Yes.
Cool.
Yes.
And how do I start it? There's one thing I didn't test. Is it view present? There we go. Cool. All right. So as you probably know, my presentation is about the view model pattern in Angular and how to sort of simplify components and improve performance at the same time. Oh, by the way, obviously there's not very many of us, so you know, if anyone wants me to elaborate or go off on a tangent or has any questions, just dive in. That's absolutely fine. So I'm going to be talking about simplifying component states and improving performance, and doing so using the view model pattern and on-push change detection in Angular. So I'll start out with talking a little bit about component states, the problems we can run into, and potential solutions for that using the view model pattern. So the first thing, I tried to just list a couple of issues that I think are quite common to run into. I mean, the main thing that I'm sure everyone's familiar with is as components become more complicated, adding more functionality, they become difficult to understand, reason about, and maintain going forward. And there's loads of different reasons this can happen, but I've tried to sort of name a few of them that are relevant. So when we talk about component state, what I mean by that is things like data that the component uses, whether or not an accordion is open or a button's being clicked, or IDs of users that have been deleted, this kind of thing that's local to a component itself. And so quite often with the sort of normal way of developing in Angular or anywhere for that matter, the state is kind of stored piecemeal, spread all over a component, mixed up with other things like stuff used in the template, things like that. And sometimes the business logic, sometimes the logic of the state changes and state mutation is sprinkled throughout the component. And it's really easy for this to happen because as you build up a component and it changes and you add things to it over time, stuff kind of just ends up here and there throughout the component. And so when there are often different entry points, different methods that all do a little bit of logic and mutation on the state, and so that kind of scatters the mutation, makes it difficult to reason about. And then another problem is it's quite difficult to make a component reactive in terms of reactive programming when the sort of reactive strategy hasn't been incorporated from the beginning. So when you're introducing lots of observables, it's tricky to sort of retrofit that. So I'm going to show you a couple of code examples. Well, show you a code example, and then show you 5 problems with it that I've identified. If you want to visit the bit.ly link here, you can follow along with me, or just if you'd rather just watch the presentation, because I'm going to switch to that screen in a sec. So yeah, if anyone wants to copy down that link, just let me know and I'll go back to it. So this is my contrived example. So it's a user table, basically just a list of users with the ability to sort it, the ability to hide individual users, and that's pretty much it. So should be pretty familiar. I think this is generally how the way components are coded in Angular. And so I'll go through a couple of problems with it, and then show you how I've tweaked this slightly to use the view model pattern to hopefully alleviate a few of those problems. And again, this is quite a contrived example. in reality, like this would be there'd be a lot more complexity in here, and I think also components like this often do get very complex because a lot of features get sort of added into them. And you know, like always, there's an argument to break things down into smaller chunks and smaller components and simplify things that way, which is 100% valid. But sometimes you can't do that, and sometimes you don't have the time to do that, or whatever. And the cool thing about the viewModel pattern is it goes some way to solving a lot of these problems right from the beginning. It's not something you have to then do further down the line. So I've got this list of 5 issues here. So the first one is, and again, this isn't so applicable now, but when the component becomes a little bit more complex in the future, you often have a lot of subscriptions to, say, API requests or getting data from the state manager store. It's difficult to maintain order. You may introduce race conditions, that kind of thing. So I've put a little marker by where that's happening. So in this case, just subscribe. Another problem is states often intermingled with other properties. So right now we have essentially these 3 properties are make up the state of the component. This 4th one is just used in a template, so it's not considered state, but it's still kind of stored next to the others. And again, you know, this is quite a simple component, but when you start to double or triple the complexity, which, you know, that's quite common, it starts to get a little bit, it's just noise, you know, it's something that you have to ignore. Another issue that we have is state mutation code is mixed up amongst other code. So what number was that? That was 3. So an example here, we have not that one, that's a mistake. This one, for example. So, no, sorry, not that one either. I know what I did. I deleted one from here and didn't update the code. So what I was going to say was state mutation code is mixed up amongst other code. So we've got a bit of code here where, you know, when the component loads, we grab the users from the store, we do some filtering to apply which users are hidden or not, and then we do some sorting. And then down here, when you you change the sort property, so you change the way that the users are sorted, we have to update the sort again. And then down here, when you hide a user, you have to reapply the filtering. So yeah, it's a little bit all over the place. You know, the logic is kind of here and there and everywhere. Again, you know, you can sort this very easily with just batching that all up into a say a set users property method, for example. But the problem with that is it's very easy to just chuck a line of logic in here and chuck a line of logic in there, and then before you know it, everything's spread out everywhere, and you're in a situation where it would take a big refactor and lots of testing to reliably get it into a good position. Whereas the viewModel pattern kind of pushes you towards solving this problem before it even happens. Where were we? So number 4, difficult to make components reactive retrospectively. So, or even not retrospectively. When you've got lots of subscribes like this and it's built in this way, it is hard to introduce lots of observables and then reason about them. And then finally, we've got the fact that we have to manually clean up our observables. So here we've got a subscription, an asynchronous subscription to our data store, and we're using, in this case, until destroyed this, which will essentially unsubscribe this subscription when the component gets destroyed. And it's not much code; it's just 3 lines, including the import, but it's quite critical to actually do this. If you forget to do it, you can introduce nasty bugs, introduce memory leaks, that kind of thing. Yeah, so that's just a summary of a few issues that you can run into when you're not using the viewModel pattern. And so I'm going to introduce the view model pattern and just talk a little bit about how this can go some way to alleviate these issues and hopefully prevent them before they even happen. So what is the view model pattern? All it is, it's 3 steps. So the first step is the view model itself is an interface that contains all the data required to draw the view. And that makes it quite succinct. So in our case, it will be the list of users, and say you wanted to print on the screen the number of users that have been hidden for whatever reason. Or maybe when this component gets a little bit more complex, it might be some pagination, or some, the number of pages in total that occur if there's a next page, whether or not you can click the next button. So so the view model contains everything you need to draw the view for the component. And that makes it quite succinct because everything's bundled into one interface and sort of put in one place. The second step is we provide to the template the view model via an observable chain. And so I'll show you what I mean by that in a sec, but that makes it very reactive. And so it's really easy to pull in all kinds of data from all kinds of stores, from APIs, from state management, from subjects or observables on services. So yeah, it's super reactive right from the get-go. And then the third step is we leverage the async pipe to handle subscription cleanup, which means a little bit less code when you're writing, but most of all, it means that you're sure every time that the subscription is cleaned up, there's no memory leaks or bugs. So I'll show you the next code example now. I'll take you through the code example, and then I'll go one by one through the ways that it's much better and cooler. So okay, so here we've got our modified user table component. The first thing you'll see is this interface called VM because it's a private interface, so we can just call it whatever. I call it VM because it's easy to understand what it is and keeps it consistent. VM stands for view model, obviously. In our case, we only have 2 properties because these are the 2 things that we want to display in our template. So we have a list of users and a list of IDs of users that should be hidden. And then if we come down to the properties on the component, this is a fair bit leaner because the only public properties we have are this helper method, which is exposed to the template, and then this VM property, which is our observable, which outputs our view model. So I tend to suffix these with $. Some people use that convention to indicate that it's an observable. I generally only use it when I'm unpacking this observable in a template, which I'll show you what I mean by that in a second. Then we have these 2 private properties, which store the states for the way that the users are sorted. So in this case, by name, and also the hidden user IDs. So the IDs of the users that are hidden. Both of these are behavior subjects, and I'm sure you guys both know, but a subject is kind of like a stream of data that you can push values through. But it also acts as an observable, so you can subscribe to it and get those values back out again. As it also has an initial value, so this is where you provide the initial value. In our case, we're saying the default sort is going to be by the name property, and then here we're saying by default we're not hiding any user IDs. So our properties are a little bit more well organized. I use a linter to enforce like property order based on access modifiers. So I tend to have public then private. So using this method allows you to it allows you to make a lot more properties private and not accessible to the templates, which just keeps things a little bit more well organized and structured, I find. So then coming down to our ng on init method, we are assigning a value to the view model observable, and we're making that this observable chain. So we're using combine latest to pull in information pull in the users from the state management store, to pull in the sort option. So in this case, the starting value is the string name, and to pull in the IDs of the hidden users. And so the way combine latest works is once all of these are emitted, it's going to send that down the observable chain as an array. So then in our map, we've got these three variables: users, sort, and hidden user IDs. We're going to apply the filter, which sorts out hiding user IDs. Then we're going to sort our users based on the sort value that we have in that behavior subject, and then compile those into the view model and return it. And that's it. So we have our VM property. We can now subscribe to that, and at the end, we'll get this view model object with everything, all the logic applied, the filtering done, the sorting done, and everything ready for drawing in the view at the very end. And so something cool that you'll notice is that everywhere where we used to have business logic, so set sort, for example, so this is, say you want to change sorting users from name to email, you'd call this method. All this does now is puts the new value in the behavior subject. So it calls sort.next, which causes this to emit, which then causes this whole chain to be processed. The users are refiltered and resorted. We get a new view model, and then Angular updates the template accordingly. So these methods are really lean now. All the business logic is in this observable chain. And so that's one of the ways that it makes things a lot easier to understand. I'm going to just run through these 6 issues now that we've got. So the first thing is subscription order is clearly indicated and controlled by the observable chain. So we have this observable chain. It's super easy to just drop new observables in, take them out, change the order, add, leverage the power of Rxjs operators to mutate the values and things like that. Much easier than before, where you might have had to have had quite a holistic idea about how the component works before you can really hope to start to modify it. State is clearly stored separately to other properties. So I really like the fact that you have this separate view model interface that contains everything that's required to draw the view and that is considered state. And then these subjects kind of pull information to compose that view model. I think it's kind of a nice way to summarize what that component is for by just glancing at it and seeing what's in the state there. Sorry, the view model. State mutation all happens in one place. Methods are named semantically. So again, I mentioned that just now. All the logic is up here. It's really easy to reason about. If one of the, I'll talk about drawbacks later, but one of the problems is sometimes this can get quite bloated and complicated. And so sometimes what you might want to do is abstract some of this out into private methods. And these methods can be really carefully named so they convey a lot of meaning. But if you're able to do that well, you can just scan down this observable chain and see exactly what it does and in what order, and it makes it really easy to reason about what's going on. State mutation is still random, but methods are lean and logic is in the observable chain. So what I mean by that is you still have lots of different methods around the component that modify the state, but they're very lean. They don't do that much. All they do is pass the new state into these behavior subjects or replay subjects or whatever you're using, which then triggers the observable chain to cascade again. So it's just easier to follow what's going on in the code. Components are reactive by default, so like I said earlier, it's really easy to just drop new observables into that chain. And then there's no manual observable cleanup needed. So whereas before I was using until destroyed, here we are using the async pipe, which Angular actually handles the unsubscription once the component is destroyed for you anyway. So if I show you the template here, you'll see how this is actually consumed. So what we're doing is we're using ngIf. It's a bit weird. I feel like Angular should come up with a better way of doing this, but this is the way. This is the best way I found to do it. So we say ngIf, and then the view model observable. We pipe that through the async pipe, and then we store it as a variable called VM. And so what Angular is going to do is going to subscribe to this observable, and then wait for it to emit. As soon as it emits, it's going to then render this whole block with the variable called VM within the context, and then you just access the properties directly off that variable. So yeah, like I mentioned, the async pipe will handle all your unsubscriptions. So we no longer need the until destroyed decorator or the until destroy operator either. So yeah, so that's it for the view model pattern. Going to move on and talk briefly about performance, because there's quite a cool way that you can link on push change detection into this pattern as well. So yeah, change detection allows Angular to figure out what has changed and update the view accordingly. So in our previous component, it would have been anytime the user's property is set, or anytime the user clicks a button or something and triggers a method. Angular has two types: default, which is very imaginatively named, and on push. So I'd probably maybe a better name for default would be eager, because you can think of it as Angular's trying very enthusiastically to hook into all the different areas of the browser to figure out when it should update the view. So the way it does that is it monkey patches browser functionality, and by monkey patching, it's kind of like overriding a method to add some functionality. So for example, it does the overrides the add event listener method, overrides setting timeouts, setting intervals, overrides AJAX requests, object getters and setters. Everywhere where Angular can sort of put those hooks, it does to try to make it really easy for the developer to not have to worry about triggering that manually. But obviously the problem with that is, while it's very nice to work that way, because you just don't have to think about it, it's also very inefficient. You're constantly having change detection cycles running when nothing's actually changed. So contrast that to on push, which is what we'll be using. There's only, I think, about 4 instances with the on push change detection. 4 events, sorry, that trigger the change detection and a template update. One of them is when an input property reference changes, and I put this in italic because the fact that it's reference can trip people up sometimes. So say you assign an object to an input property and then change a property on that object, Angular won't detect the change, and so won't update the template. So that's quite a nice argument for functional programming. Anytime an event bubbles up from this component or one of its children, or anytime you manually trigger detect changes on the change detector ref service, or anytime the async pipe emits. And so this is the key really to our how these two are linked in. But yeah, on push is much more efficient, but of course it requires a lot more developer knowledge and skill, unless you use the view model pattern. So I'll run you through the third and final code sample today. This file is actually, is it exactly the same? It's almost exactly the same as the previous one I showed you, apart from 2 lines. So the first one is we just add this import and add this line here. So what this line does is it says for this component, use the on-push change detection strategy, and that's it. If you're using the VM pattern, that is all you have to do. If you were using the old pattern, in fact, I'm getting ahead of myself here a little bit. Let me jump back a sec. So that's all you have to do. You add that those couple of changes, and the async pipe triggers change detection each time each time the observable emits. So if we look back into the template, because we're using the async pipe to unpack everything from our everything for our template, anytime we get an emission through that observable, and the changes that are needed will be made to this this template. So that it's really easy with the viewModel pattern. If we didn't have the viewModel pattern, we would have to call manually detect changes in all of our subscribe callbacks, all of our methods that aren't triggered by user events like clicks or keyboard key enters, because user events are picked up by the on-push change detection, or on input property reference changes. So yeah, if you're using the viewModel pattern from the beginning, it's just much easier to set this kind of thing up. You just drop it in, and everything's set up for you from the get-go. So there are a few drawbacks that I've noticed. I've used this pattern for, like, I'd say 2, maybe 3 years now. Firstly, I'd say the main one is that it requires quite advanced Rxjs. Obviously, what the examples that I showed you were very simple, but yeah, before long, you can get some pretty difficult and complicated Rxjs chains in there. For me, it's not a problem really, because I really like Rxjs, and I think that it's very powerful and worth learning. But particularly for full stack developers, they've got so much to learn already. They've got to learn all of the back end, all of the front end, any infrastructure, or they would know, or DevOps or whatever. It's a lot to sort of keep current with all of that. But so far, the people I'm working with at the moment seem to be okay once they kind of get through the initial paradigm shift of thinking in a more reactive way. It's okay. And then, of course, junior devs sometimes struggle with concepts of async and things like that. But, they just have to learn it, I guess. Yeah, the observable chains can become very complicated, but like I mentioned earlier, you can break these up into like smaller private helper methods. And if you name them very semantically, it can actually, to be honest, if you name them very semantically, it can aid a lot in understanding, because you end up just reading vertically the chain and then knowing visually what's going on. And then again, on push change detection, it requires a fairly decent understanding of how it works. So, I mean, I had this issue just today actually, where I moved a component from one. What did I do? Oh, that was it. I made the parent component of another component on push, which also makes all its children on push as well, even if they're not marked as on push. And so this child component that I had was just not rendering anything in the UI. And so it took me a couple of minutes, but I realized what had happened is that because I had made the parent component on push, the view of the child component wasn't being updated. I've had this before. The first time that happened, it took me a little while to figure it out. And so, yeah, it's these kinds of bugs that can be quite difficult to diagnose if you don't have a good understanding of what onPush does. So, to summarize, a viewModel is a component-specific interface that contains all the data to render the view. You provide it to the template using an observable chain. You can store internal state using subjects, and then feed those subjects or observables into the observable chain. You then unpack the viewModel observable and store it as a variable inside the template, and use the async pipe. And then you use on-push change detection, and voila, that's all you have to do. The benefits are cleaner code, more semantic meaning. It's easier to reason about things, easier to understand things, and more efficient because you're just triggering far fewer cycles of change detection. So yeah, that is it. Let me find the screen.
I think a small round of applause. Okay.
Very small, please.
I'm just. Do you mind if I ask us some questions?
Yeah, please do.
Cool. Okay.
Yeah, please.
So I see you're still presenting me in the center, which I always find a bit boggling. Thanks, mate. Right.
Yeah. No worries. I find that
as well. So I'm actually going to change my view so I can see everybody at the same time. Okay, let's do that. There we go. There, lovely. Right. So yeah, what I was thinking was firstly this pattern. Can I ask where you found it? How did you discover it?
Yeah, I've been trying to figure this out for a long time because I have a feeling that I have a feeling that about four years ago I came across it online somewhere, and have never seen it since online. So I think I saw it once. I think I used it at the place I was contracting with at the time. Used it kind of inconsistently, not always, but a fair amount. And then when I started here, where I've been for almost a year now, I think, I used it a couple of times, and one of the other lead devs there really liked it and asked me to sort of explain a little bit why. And then we also introduced on-push change detection, which I had never used before, and I realized obviously that how nicely they kind of fitted together. So now we use it for basically every component we create.
If I might say so, I think that would be the main reason for using it.
Yeah.
Because the others are just nice to haves, but the actual efficient use of change detection, I would say, is a primary reason for using it.
Yeah, I think that's fair to say, and it makes it so easy. Like, it's so easy to introduce a bug with on push that it's just you really don't have to think about it.
Exactly. So I've just got a few more questions in my mind. Combine latest.
Yeah.
Okay. Was that also part of the pattern? Is that how you got introduced to that operator?
I think I'd used it before. I use it so often, to be honest, but I can't really remember. But I mean, you can do whatever you want. You can start off with a form control and then switch map to an API request and merge map to.
Of course, yes, yeah. It seemed like a very efficient way of using sort of disparate state values and then obviously combining them. But but importantly, is the order in which they fire. So with combine latest, I presume it waits for everyone to have a value and then fires for the first time.
Exactly.
And then as one changes, all of them fire again. Yes?
Yeah, exactly. As one changes, it will reuse the last emission from all the others and the new one.
Yeah, good. So you get a multiplication of events effectively, because every event triggers an event across all of them, but they are just duplications of the same value.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. So it's So I mean, I'd say combine latest is probably 90% of the time is the starting point for the viewModel observable chain. It's why I like Rxjs so much, is that you can plug in whatever you want, whatever observable it is, you can just shove it in and it will work. So yeah.
Have you written any Marvel's unit tests around combine latest?
No, we actually do very, very few front-end unit tests, I'm afraid to say.
I know you historically have been naughty, so it's good to hear you still are.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, we do loads on the back end, but front end, like we only really write them when it's calculations or some important business logic or something like that. So yeah, I mean, we're tearing up code and changing it so quick that the tests would just go obsolete really quickly.
I understand. Yeah, you're iterating quickly. So.
Yeah. I'd like to write more tests, to be honest. It's my weakest part, I think, of front-end dev, definitely. But
yes, I understand. It's it used to be mine. Yeah. So
yeah, you write a lot. You're doing a lot.
I write tons of them. Yes.
Yeah, you do a lot of like test-oriented presentations as well.
I do, and I'm about to do another.
Great. Looking forward to it.
So we'll talk about that in a second. But
yeah,
I don't need to blow a trumpet because we'll naturally segue into that.
Cool.
But I'm just wondering if any of us here are on push change detection strategy experts.
Not really.
No. Oh, I was just hoping that as Stephen, you might have delved into this in some depth.
I do it. I do it when I can, but I have so I'm the only sole front end developer in my company, and the rest are full stack developers. So when they get in there, it's just get it working.
It's bedlam. I totally understand. I know your experience. I know your pain.
I'm the same, funny enough.
Yeah. So I do know about this pattern. I use it with Nrxs, and I pretty much do everything through async pipes instead of doing subscriptions.
That's cool.
How many full stacks do you have, Steve?
4.
Okay. Yeah.
So
do you find the same thing that they sort of struggle with Rxjs as well?
Yeah. I think a lot of concepts in Angular they kind of struggle with. Even like, it's, I think the crossover with Java, that how you type things is, sort of familiar for them.
Yeah.
But they try to implement like that kind of coding style that they do for Java on the front end in TypeScript, and it often ends like way too verbose or involves a lot of mutations. They don't kind of understand that, we need pure functions in order.
Yeah. Oh yes, 100%. I'm
absolutely
a big fan of functional programming.
Yeah, and I couldn't agree more. I think it's the way to go.
Yeah, like one of my first rules that I had try to keep enforcing is that never turn data from the server into a class.
Yeah.
So I treat everything that comes from the API as like a resource.
Yeah.
And I like the concept of a resource, and you just never turn it into a class. It's just data. You feed it into a function. The function does something.
Yeah.
And then you move on.
Yeah. Yeah. I my first Angular project, I started off first TypeScript project as well. I started off doing the exact opposite, like trying to make everything classes, and I pretty quickly realized that just like all the parsing and the instantiation and everything could all be avoided if I had just used some pure functions instead. And so that's what I always do now. It's much nicer.
It's a good lesson to learn, Max.
Yeah. Are you doing the same, Tom?
Majoritively, I tend to pick up other people's components and then rip all the state out of them and turn them functional.
Yeah. Nice.
But that's a work in progress. The other thing I wanted to ask about this pattern, just comment actually, is do you remember back in the days of Angular 1, there was a VM type pattern that was, yeah, it was publicized by John Papa.
As in Angular JS?
Yes.
I never really wrote any Angular JS, but I didn't know that they had a VM.
Yeah, well, it wasn't observable streams by any chance, and it wasn't even promises, but it was to simplify the code, that you put everything into a view model object, and then made all the properties for your template hang off that.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Well, I concept was I think it's kind of different in this than this case, because it's still mutation of that object, that model.
Oh,
yes, it is.
Okay.
That's cool. All right. I felt like I had another question, and unfortunately, it's gone. Ah, no, that's slick. No, it's gone. Sorry, but I really enjoyed that. Oh yes, that's the last part, because you asked me when we were preparing for this. Okay. What I'm doing that's similar. Okay.
Yeah.
And what I liken it to, because I agree that using a view model observable is from a code perspective is more easy to comprehend and easier to work with. But I think a lot of people who start using on-push change detection might switch to a lot of async pipes in the same template.
Yeah.
And I'm just wondering, it's in my mind, and I don't have an answer for this, but I would like to know which is the more performant, not the most efficient to use, but whether in your case you had two key sort of state streams there that you were tying together in your simplified example.
Yeah.
And I'm just wondering if they were two separate observable streams, so that only part of the template updated with that, whether that model would be more performant. I would like to know.
Yeah, so I know that it will depend on how you write your component. So one of the things that my example had was every time the observable chain emitted, it would slice and then resort the users array, which is obviously a change in reference. And so Angular would then redraw, because the array has changed, it would redraw the items. To an extent, you can probably mitigate that by using track by in the ngFor, which I'm sure the other guys have come across already, but I'll just talk about it really briefly. It's a method that allows you to help Angular identify when an object in an array has changed or not. And so whenever you write an ngFor, you should really write a track by function as well, because that will also help performance a lot. So I think it depends on how you write your component. If you do things like using track by, Angular should be able to work out what needs to be updated and what doesn't. It might be possible to do a very similar thing, but to break it up into multiple observables with multiple async pipes. I've not really gone down that route that far, so maybe you can tell me how you get on. But I'm sure it has.
I'm not saying it's necessarily a good pattern, because I think if you've got a complex situation with a lot of async pipes, it could be hard to reason about and have race conditions.
Yeah.
So by combining the latest of all of them, it is a very efficient way of guaranteeing your success. So I can't argue with it. I would just like to know the performance parameters of it. Is it a percentage better, or is it 50% better? And then it's worth thinking about.
Yeah, it's good.
But regardless, I think your pattern is enough to make anybody think. In my case, I've been looking at using Nrx selectors that combine the selectors from other places into one piece of state that is an observable, and hence has done your combine latest already. It's just a selector.
That's also a very interesting thing, because that will leverage the memoization and caching of NGRX. So that's a cool approach as well.
Yeah, I was only recently introduced to that idea because I've always worked with separate selectors, and then I thought, oh, I've been daft all this time. You know, that's such an obvious win-win. So I'm on that now.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, I think we've got a couple, and in this company we call them higher order selectors. I don't know what you call them. Same thing.
That sounds magical. If you could add a sort of Harry Potter-ness to it, it would be really good.
What about highness order selectors?
I like all of that. Yes. I won't go any further, but yes, that was marvelous.
Cool. All right. Well, yeah.
Well done. Excellent presentation. Yeah.
Cheers. But yeah, if you wanted to, before you wanted to get started, should we have a little break? Because I
was going to suggest this. That's why I was hesitating.
Oh, cool.
So how about we have a 5-minute break?
Yep.
Is that cool with you guys?
Yeah, that works.
Okay, and yeah, because I fancy getting a drink, and then I'll get queued up, and you guys can just join, and I'll wait till you're in, and we'll get going. Okay.
All right. Yep.
Cool. Cheers. Bye. Hey, Max.
Hiya.
Stephen, are you online? Stephen, are you there now?
Hey, yeah, guys. I'm on a call real quick, so I'll just I'll jump back on in a second.
Oh, yeah, cool. Are you? Yeah, okay, no problem.
So you guys can continue on without me.
Okay, will do. Oh, hello, Stephen, number 2. It's only because you arrived after, but hi, hello again.
Hello again.
All right. Your microphone is excellent, by the way, because you've got the proper headset and everything.
Yeah, it's I think I might have got a bit carried away with this setup.
You should present something, I think.
Yeah, if only I had something useful to present.
You could do some DJing or something anyway.
Maybe. Maybe
Okay.
not.
All right, I'm going to get started if that's okay with you guys. Right, here we go.
Oh, Tom?
Yes, please.
you want me to take notes?
Actually, that's a fine question. Your GitHub repo for the demo that you just did,
Yeah.
is that in your presentation notes?
It is actually, yeah. There's a bit.ly link.
Good. All right. Okay. In that case, I'm going to help everybody for this. Whoops. I didn't want to jump to page 2 already. Right. I will highlight some stuff. Okay. So in the meetup itself on the website, hopefully you can see that. Can you? Yeah.
Yep.
Good. Okay. If you scroll down, you'll see a link to our sort of notes page. Okay, which is just a Firebase app, and I will open that now. Okay, and this is the site, and down here we've got the latest notes on what we're talking about, and the stuff that Max did. Unfortunately, I've done it in the wrong order because he presented first today.
Right.
But yeah, here is a link to your slide deck, which I'll open in a new tab. Okay, and so now we all have access to all of your notes plus your GitHub repo, which is what page?
It will be on the first code example, so slide 7.
Oh, okay. There we go.
And 4 and yeah. So it's
Fantastic.
that bit.ly link on the left.
Okay, so now you've got access to everything if you follow those couple of clicks. Okay.
Yeah.
Good. Right. So I'm going to do a presentation about Cypress, but you can follow along some of it if you go back to the site. I've left some notes here that are going to be useful to us, and I'll be adding to that after the meetup. Okay. But the only reason I haven't added everything in there is so that I've got something for a slide deck. So I'm going to jump to that now.
Cool.
Okay, and present it. All right. So obviously I'm going to talk about integration testing with Cypress. So can I ask, first of all, maybe a show of hands, or thanks, Max, show of hands or anything, if anybody's done any E2E testing?
Yes, I have.
Woohoo! We got one.
This is when I feel very embarrassed.
Excellent.
I used Cypress before.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Okay. Have you used it extensively or just a bit, or how do you feel about it?
Just a bit. We got started a few months ago and then kind of dropped it for a little bit, and now we're back in a place where we're trying to redo our end-to-end tests. And so yeah, that's kind of why I came to this event, was to learn.
Wonderful. Oh, well, in that case, I will try to drop at least a couple of points that are useful. Okay. So I'll explain a little bit about Cypress. I've been using it for only a few months in anger, but before that I was just playing around with it on and off over the last year or so. Okay. Yeah, I'm just gonna explain a few of my experiences, some gotchas, but most importantly, what I like for the other guys here is to show how easy it is to get started. All right.
Well,
go on.
Can you explain a bit about what it is?
Oh my goodness, yes. Okay, so I'm about to do that actually, but
Okay.
I will suffice to say that E2E testing in general is about testing from the browser perspective. Okay, so the whole idea about it is that you act as a user. Basically, you supply mouse clicks in different places, or touches if you're a mobile user, and scroll events and that kind of thing, or yeah, all that kind of stuff. Just interact with the browser, and then expect. Go on.
Sorry. Go ahead. I'll ask it when you're done.
Okay, and then you expect values on screen to appear, and you test them. Okay, whatever they are, you expect something to change, and you go and test for it. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Now I've done a bit of hacking about with it. And I've got a slightly cunning way of getting to the underneath of it, and I'll talk about that shortly. Okay, but I've also spent a lot of time doing something that Cypress does extremely well, which is mocking API calls. So instead of doing full end-to-end testing, and by that I mean an entire system, including the back end, my objective is to only test the front end code. So I mock every API call. Okay.
Cool. Was Protractor not the recommended end-to-end test engine originally?
It technically still is. Okay. But I think a lot of people are starting to feel that it's the slightly doddery, uncared for uncle of Angular that is going the way of all things that get old. He's due for retirement, basically. But not everybody feels that way. There are people who are very pro Protractor. Usually they're people who are experienced in it, because it's more verbose, but it has more powers in on the edge cases. Okay. All right. But I think the majority of Angular developers will find Cypress easier to work with, and therefore get more done with it, and therefore get more tested with it, and therefore get more value from it. Okay. So, that's my argument. And in particular, it's recommended above Protractor by Nrwl. And as you know, I don't actually have a Nrwl t-shirt, but technically I would, because I believe in Nrwl, or NX workspaces, I should say. Right.
Yeah. So my experience is good with them as well.
Oh, good. I'm glad you feel that way too. That's 2 votes. How about you, Stephen? Both Stephens, actually. Has anyone done some Nrwl?
Not very much.
Okay. Have you had a little look at it at all?
Yeah, I have. I was at a company that used it.
Cool. All right. That's fine. No problem. I think this is one of the excuses to use it. Cypress comes out of the box with Nrwl NX workspaces. And I'll explain a bit of that in a short moment. I don't really need to mention any of these bullet points. This is just my perspective, okay? But it is subjective. There are people who feel differently, okay? This is what Cypress looks like. It's an Electron app that can also open your browser to run tests, but it's also got a browser built into Electron, so it can run the tests inside those. I've actually had problems with the tests running inside Electron because the tests I do are incredibly verbose, and I think there's a point where it gets a bit confused. Right, moving on. Right, here's some helpers. Here's some sort of meat and potatoes why it's worth looking at this presentation at all. Okay, it's the default selection when you create a Nrwl Nx workspace and a new app. The other alternatives like Protractor can be manually selected as a drop-down selection within the process of creating it from the CLI. But like I say, Cypress is the default because they prefer it over Protractor. But for people who want to get started with Cypress, but already have a workspace with Protractor in it, they can use this command, ng generate Nrwl Cypress project, and then it'll ask you for the project name which you could call like E2E dash the name of the project that matches your current Angular project, or something in that naming convention. It will also, that command will also allow you to create a Cypress E2E test project alongside your Protractor project. So if you've got investment in Protractor, you can create this alongside and wow your colleagues with further testing, hopefully in an easier way. But it depends, because if you've got experts, they're going to like it. Sorry about the quick flash there. Right, the final thing that's worth mentioning is that you can also generate an app with the Cypress test runner inside a workspace that defaults to Protractor. So you can build the app and the E2E at the same time with the bottom command. Okay, right, let's move on. Oh, any questions, by the way, at this stage? No, you might have some questions about these gotchas. Okay, here we go. Page errors stop tests passing. All right. Now, as I mentioned earlier, that the website link in the meetup page of the meetup.com, okay, takes you to our website, which has a link to the documents, and that includes my slide deck. So if you want to get at these details, these gotchas, they're accessible to you right now. The page errors is a link to Stack Overflow, I think, or no, it's within the help pages of Cypress. But the point is that if you've got an HTML page with JavaScript errors, okay, Cypress will stop its test running because it considers an error in JavaScript to be a test failure. All right, but you can code past it. All right, there's an override that you can apply. And that's all I'll say at the minute, because I'm not going to advertise it to you because it's technically bad practice, because JavaScript errors are a bad thing and you should be fixing them. Okay. Right. The next bullet point is the wait for a root alias creates less issues than wait time. I'm going to show you some syntax shortly, and you'll get the gist of it. But there is a command called wait within Cypress, and it allows the page to hydrate or spend some time if you've got a spinner or all that kind of thing. You might need things to happen, and you can set an amount of milliseconds to wait. But you can also wait for this thing called a root alias, which a root alias is an alias that's applied to an API mock setup. So when it will therefore wait for a URL call to a specific API endpoint before continuing the test. Okay, that was a bit verbose, but that's it. Any questions as yet? No, we're cool. All right. The other one that I mentioned briefly earlier is that Macs can't run tests on Electron when they're complex. I've run into this problem. It doesn't make me happy. That's probably my biggest annoyance with this application, but I still rate it as better than Protractor.
What's the? Do you know what? I mean, what happens when it fails? Does it just blow up, or is there a warning, or and do you know why?
It starts. Well, the problem actually is that Electron will not actually display your web page within its browser. Okay, and if you look at the console tab within the Electron browser, it says an error was thrown for too many threads running for something blah blah, and it's basically a level of complexity that it can't handle. Okay.
Right.
I suspect that I caused it by having too many API mocks. That's my theory currently, but I haven't been able to break it down to find that out. Okay. But because
sounds, I mean, it would surprise me if, I don't know, it should, unless you wrote millions and millions of them.
You'd think so, wouldn't you?
It seems like it shouldn't fail. Yeah, so maybe it's like an Electron issue.
Well, the funny thing is, allegedly on a high-powered PC, it will run, and on Linux, it runs beautifully. And as usual with Linux, that's usually a really low-spec, single processor, because it can do that. Anyway, final bullet point is that you can reach a point with Angular DOM composition where you need to introduce wait times, because the promises within Cypress get ahead of themselves, and they start expecting things to be hydrated when they're not. It's best to try and lean on as many root aliases as you can, but there are times, for example, if you've got an animation where you've got to wait for things to appear. Okay.
Can it? I've used Selenium a long time ago, and you could configure Selenium to wait until like a query selector returns true.
That's right. And technically, Selenium, what it's doing during that period is it's constantly pinging it. Okay, so it's pinging it like every, I don't know, 50 milliseconds, and trying to find that query selector. And actually, Cypress works on the same basis. Okay, it's by default it allows, I try to remember, I think it's probably half a second to a second. No, I tell a lie, it's 4 seconds. By default, out of the box, it waits for a query selector to appear. However, there is a gotcha, and this is why I'm highlighting this bullet point, that sometimes it goes into checking for the query selector to exist. But if your query selector uses multiple selection points, like a class within a class, and then an element number 5, then it can create a condition where it said, I found that, and therefore this doesn't exist, so I must assume it's not going to happen. And so it throws the error. It says, I'm not finding it. Okay, so it's assuming stuff. So you do need a wait under those conditions. All right, but you just discover it as you go, because obviously you're adding each thing as you go, and you test that bit and make sure that works. Okay, moving on, time for a demo. Right, now, funnily enough, the demo that I'm going to use is our Angular meetup website, because I was thinking, what am I going to use as a Cypress demo? Because I can't show the code that I'm working on. It's I've signed several clauses that would get me in big trouble if I did. So how am I going to actually demonstrate it? And then I thought, yes, I will use our site, because that could do with some tests, because it hasn't got any unit tests. So why not put some tests in there? Okay, so let's get to it. Okay, I'm going to take you to that site now, and I'm going to just demonstrate it from the beginning. So our website is built with 2 curious things. Okay, and I'll show you the code shortly. But the curious things are that the router does not function as a router. It is an Angular app, all right, but the router / is actually a parameter, and I've got a parameter listener that then scrolls to the component on a single page. So all of the components, all the content is separate components for each of our meetups and for the about and contact section. Okay, and I can just click on one and it'll scroll to it. And it does that by listening to the root change and checking the parameter that's coming through. Does that make sense so far? Okay. The other thing that it does that I think is more interesting than that is that both the menu and the documents within it are all marked down and then converted into Angular pages using a markdown converter. All right. The reason I've done that is so that within the actual GitHub repo itself, which is here, I keep all of the content as markdown files, all right? And I keep the menu as a markdown file with links in it, okay, that I then interpolate to become the menu links within the app. And then you can navigate to the content in those pages. This is the one for tonight. And the benefit is that I can do this online now. I don't even have to edit the app. I can just edit the page inside GitHub, and I've got a content manager. Okay, and I think that's quite natty. I don't know if you do.
So do you load the markdown files with Ajax then directly from GitHub?
I do, directly from GitHub. The way I go and do it is I go to the raw version. Okay, so I pick up that URL, and I keep a record of this part of the URL, and then I just navigate through these by looking at the menu component, which it relies on. So if you go there, that has a hook to all of the documents. So that's the key. That index there has to be correct. And so it's got to be correctly linked.
Yeah.
But that's it. That's all it does. All right.
Cool.
And so there I am. I've got a bunch of API calls that I can now mock. Okay. And a menu that I can mock as well. All right. And I'll show you doing that in Cypress, if that's cool. All right. So just to show you briefly, here's the menu view component. And it's getting the file, the menu file, which I showed you earlier, and then it's stripping out the beginning and ends of the tags from the markdown document to create titles and routes, and then it feeds the routes into the meetup service update meetups thingy wizzy, and then that goes into the service, and then it goes and pulls in the meetup documents, okay? And it does that via this component, which has some markup of, yes, there we go. It basically uses this markdown directive to interpolate the markdown into HTML that's styled in particular so that it can do this kind of thing. It can do code formatting.
Oh, nice.
Okay. Yeah. Anyway, that's enough showing off. The point being that we can test this using Cypress. So if I scroll down, this is now in an NX workspace. I moved it into that for this demo. So previously it was just an Angular app. But here's the E2E that gets scaffolded with an NX workspace app when you use the generate command. And what it does inside there, I'll close out all these fellows. All right. And it auto-generates a bunch of folders for you. The first one is fixtures, where you put all your mock files. And you'll see here, I've subfolded them to make it easier to read. I've got my menu mock, which is a markdown document. The fact that it's markdown is kind of irrelevant. It's just a file, and I use it in the mock. Okay. And it's got a pages folder, and I've got these two mocked documents that have virtually nothing in them, but they're just there for fun. And then down, so that's the fixtures folder, which is where the mocks are held. Then I've got an integration folder, which comes out of the box. I don't know why they chose the name integration, but what they're meaning is it's integration tests folder. It's where your spec files go for Cypress. Okay, so Cypress has adopted the same naming strategy as Jasmine, and for that matter for Jest as well. So they all use .spec files, And in this case, this is a Cypress spec file. So we've got, I'm going to choose a nice simple one to look at. Okay, here we are. This is a very, very basic test using Cypress. It has a before each. In the before each, it goes and visits the root URL, which happens to be the home page. And then it looks for the app home element, H1 tag, and then makes sure that it contains these pieces of text. Okay. So what's interesting about this is that Cypress commands are chainable. They are technically some of the time promises, so they're asynchronous. Okay. And other times they are just doing something. So these asserts are actually promises, because they might wait for a period. As I mentioned, it was up to 4 seconds by default, and you can extend that time if you want to on any given test. Excuse me, just having a quick slurp. So that's a simple test. Now we'll do some slightly more complex testing. Okay, and over here, do you remember I said it was a scrolling application? So what this test does is it first of all defaults to navigating to a testing observables link. Now the testing observables link is actually on the real homepage. It's not on a mocked one. This is just the real thing. All right. So it's using the real data that it's got, and I'll show you what I mean by the real data. Because if I go down back into the content of this app, which is in the assets folder in the markdown, okay, I've got a testing observables make markdown document. Okay, does that make sense? All right. So if I come back here, the before each does the first navigation. I've made a note here that I'm being a bit naughty because I'm trying to mock. No, sorry, not mocking. I'm checking that the linkage to GitHub is working. Okay, because I am using the GitHub API, the raw files API, in order to deliver my content. So I'm just testing that. So I do a wait for 2 seconds, and then I have a command that I'm confirm section is scrolled into view, and it should say testing observables. So I'll take my code just builds an ID tag that has that value. Okay, and I'll take you into that function, which is exported from another of the folders, and it's in the support folder you'll see here. So we'll go there. All right, and this is the function here. So here's the news. Okay, the Cypress API under the hood is using jQuery.
Oh, wow.
Yes, would you believe it? So when I've used a then in the promise here from the Cypress window, I'm now accessing jQuery objects, and I can do some custom stuff. And what I'm doing is I'm checking that a certain element has scrolled into the view.
I guess that's quite a good use of it, really, because it's, it's just a very, very broad and deep tool set for DOM manipulation. So
and in
Perfect.
particular, its DOM selectors are among the most powerful on the internet. So why not? Yeah.
Fair enough.
There you go. All right. So that's that. Okay. Let's go deeper. All right. Oh, I've got a visitor.
You've got a visitor from your daughter.
I have. So I will carry on presenting. Okay. But I've got a visitor. So it's only fair. Right. Okay. Oh, you saying hello? Are you saying hello to people? Right. So where was I? So coming back to the next most complex test, I've got a page navigation file here, and this is where the meat and potatoes of the actual mocking is going on. I've got in the before each, I've got a mock markdown docs requests function, and you saw it just a second ago. Whoops, double clicked. Let's escape from that. Okay, and what it does is it starts up the Cypress server, which is basically all about mocking APIs. That's how you enable it. And then the root command comes into play, and then you can mock all these URLs. And this is how you're mocking it. You have the request type, which is get or post, of course, and all of the other REST verbs. And then the actual URL itself that is being selected. And then finally, this piece of unusual syntax. The FX is an abbreviation for the fixture folder. Oh, oops, I think someone wants to go down the stairs. I'll just 2 ticks, guys. Sorry about this.
Yeah, no worries.
Okay, she's all right for the moment. Okay, we'll keep going. Okay, right. So it refers to the fixtures folder, and then the directory inside it, and then the file that I want to use for the mock, for the body result in my from my mocked request. I think it's really, although it's a weird syntax, it's actually really fast and really sensible to use. I don't know how you guys feel about that. Yeah, I really like that. Anyway, let's move back.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, I did think it was a bit weird, but makes perfect sense. And actually, I was wondering how you were going to do the request mocking, but that makes it really, really easy to just put it straight in Cypress.
Yeah, exactly. So in other words, you've got these few commands have done all my API mocking, and yeah, it's all based on these documents that I just showed you. So that's it, really.
That's very cool.
Yeah, pretty straightforward. Okay, so then what we do is we trigger the first navigation, and then we do a wait. And do you remember I said the wait for a root alias? This is what I'm doing. I'm waiting for the second page request. And if we go back to there, you'll see this is how I've chained the command as to create an alias. So you create the alias and then you refer to it using the @ symbol. All right. Oops. Yeah, that's the file. Thanks, Alice. All right. I'll drink some later.
Alice, for the meeting.
This is the comedy moment. Right.
Sorry.
That's all right. No worries. Okay. Yeah. I think that's pretty much all I need to show, because the rest you can sort of just read and understand. It's that simple, isn't it? Does anybody have any questions whilst I'm in this part?
I have general questions, but I guess I'll wait at the end.
Cool.
Wait till the end for that.
Fair enough. Stephen, I know you were quite interested in what Cypress tooling does. Have you seen anything interesting about the root mocking?
I don't really have any questions on that part. I am really interested in seeing some of the fixtures and like mocking some of the APIs. That's something I have a lot of difficulty with. Figuring out the best way to sort that out.
So when you say the mocking, have you ever done anything like this, like exporting a helper function that does the mocking for you?
No, I have not. Okay,
no worries. So you have access to this via the docs. You're welcome to, steal any code from this repo. I hope that bit's reasonably helpful.
Yeah, definitely.
Cool. Okay. Right, I better refer to my notes now, because this is... yeah, I think that's pretty much ended what I need to say. Oh, except I've got to show you it working, haven't I? Goodness me, how foolish is that? So let's.
We were just assuming they'd all pass.
Yeah, well, of course they do. I wrote it. So here we go. I'm gonna do this out of the box with NX. It naturally gives you a bunch of commands that tend to work, particularly with your first app. Sometimes after you're on your second app within the same workspace, then you start having to do some more work about building your own commands. But E2E watch will do this because the workspace is just defaulting to one app and one E2E test. Okay. And like I say, I do totally recommend NX workspaces, just simply because scaffolding Cypress is the best format. They do it with the best practice, and it's isolated. So instead of having Cypress config file that's tripping you up under your feet in the main place, it's actually, I don't think we've got anything Cypressy in the root. No, we haven't, and I'm happy to see that, because technically in the root of the workspace, it's not good practice to have a bunch of config files, apart from the minimum that you have to. It's good practice that we've got it all held in the Angular 2B's E2E project. So I think that's nice and clean. More to the point, where's my Cypress gone? Because there we are. Right. So this is the Electron app that we get out of the box. It just comes pre-installed when you install the Cypress facility within an NX workspace. And all of the spec files I've created that are within the integration folder automatically display. Yeah, and I can run them individually. I might as well just do one for the sake of it. Okay, and you can see it happening. Here we go, whiz, whiz, whiz. And there you go. That's it. That's the end of it. You see all these XHR testing here. That was it waiting for the page to hydrate. Okay, so it was going select until it found it.
Oh, I see. So they were like polling. They're not
Yes.
actual Ajax requests, each of those. They're just polling to check if it's been done.
Yes, that's correct. Yeah. And it's a very simple test. All it was actually doing was testing the content of this H1 tag, which it's got a BR tag in the middle of it, which is a bit of a naughty title, but regardless, it was checking for the content of both these pieces. Okay. All right. I'm gonna go back to my tests. Okay. I'm gonna stop the Electron runner. Okay. Although actually, no, I said that wrong. It was not the Electron runner. That was the Chrome runner that's run from the Electron app. Now I'm just going to run all specs.
Oh, actually,
you can see that.
Yeah, that ties into one of my questions actually.
Right.
Once you've run all the specs, that's very cool.
It's pretty groovy, isn't it?
Mm.
I
take it there's headless.
Yes, you can run it headless. Yeah, you can run it with a headless Chrome. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah. So my question was going to be that I was going to ask later, but yeah, the question I wanted to ask was which browsers does it support? And I saw the drop-down list on the app.
Yeah. Should we do that? Let's go back. So I'm not sure what it's going to say in this list, but I do know that it supports most browsers except for Internet Explorer. I'm not sure about Edge. Okay, there we go. We're only getting Firefox.
Edge is Chrome now anyway, isn't it?
Yes, that's true. So I think you probably have to add a plugin to get Safari.
Okay, cool.
So very early on, when I heard about Cypress, this was the big disappointment to me because it was primarily Chrome. But they've started adding compatibility to the other browsers. but they've been fairly slow about it, actually. I'm not impressed with how quickly they got on that bandwagon. And I think that's the main argument that protractor users go and fend off Cypress with. But for me, my argument about doing integration tests, okay, as opposed to unit tests, is number one, most unit tests, you don't end up actually testing the element in the DOM. You don't actually check that it's been displayed. Okay, so that's number one why integration tests are good. The second one is it's much easier to write one integration test that tests most of your components than writing multiple unit tests that you've forgotten to write on an app after you wanted some, if that makes sense. Because a lot of people get lazy about unit tests, and I think integration tests are a good patch for that, because they exercise your code. And if you think about a good integration test, an end-to-end test that runs through your application on all the happy path and maybe tests a bit of your validation in the process, then you've exercised most of your code with just one test, and that is cool. The biggest downside, however, is that integration tests or E2E tests are brittle, and every time you change, you end up having to edit the E2E test. But as long as you stay on top of it, it's extremely valuable, I think, because the reason I've used integration tests lately for the project that I'm on is because there's a couple, well, there's more than a couple, there's several large gaps in the unit tests within the application, and they're usually in the most complex features, because it was most difficult to write unit tests for them. And so I've written coverage using integration tests so that I can start a big refactor within those components, because they're overdue for a refactor, and I can now do it safely because I've got these integration tests which prove that my application works. Okay, any further questions?
Yes, I did actually.
Go for it.
Well, I was going to ask how easy Cypress was to set up, but actually you said it comes out the box with Nx.
Yes, super easy. Those commands I've given in the presentation earlier, they're kind of shortcuts to get back up and running when you haven't managed to do it already. But when you're scaffolding an app, that's the easiest point to add a Cypress E2E test project.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah, that sounds very good. Do you think in the long run then Angular might have it go the same way as System.js and just switch fully to Cypress?
I think it's reasonably likely. I think I can't say it's highly likely, because Protractor does do a good job, and they endorsed NGRX, which is why I'm doing it nowadays. And the fact is that both NGXS and Akita are extremely good state engines. So the point is that they have a tendency to go for the most verbose option, and I think Cypress is the most terse. So I'm not sure.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. And then NX, well, in fact, do you know if NX or Nrwl rather endorse a particular state management?
They endorse NGRX, and I happen to agree with them on that account, because you're right, there is tons of boilerplate, but the power is obvious.
Fair enough. Cool. Yeah. Well, thank you very much. give a little round of applause as well, Tom.
Oh, thank you.
Thanks for that.
Marvelous, thank you. Well, I was going to talk about NGRX data next, but I don't really have to. Is anybody interested in NGRX data whilst we're here?
I have to
that's.
Sorry, go ahead, guys. Try to synchronize this time.
Oh, I said I'm gonna have to get back to work.
Yeah, understood. I appreciate your time, and it's really good to have you here, Stephen.
Yeah, thank you. I learned a lot.
I hope you found some use for this meetup. You'd be welcome to join us again whenever you feel like it, okay?
Yeah, I'll keep an eye out for any of the events. And you guys are welcome to show up to the Angular KC events. If you just look up Angular KC, all one word, on Meetup.
Could you drop a link into the chat just before you disappear to your meetup group? Because I think I'd happily join so I can get notified.
Yeah, when you say Angular, oh, it's probably because I have within 50 miles of Hove still put in. That's why.
Well, that's often a default. So I think that's why people don't see each other.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I can see your NGXS power of selectors with Matteo Carniato.
Cool. Well done. Thank you. Yeah, I think I will call this a day then, because the NGRX data stuff isn't really a big deal. And thank you, Stephen. I will have more to say on the subject at a later date, because I'm seriously considering submitting a PR to them.
Very nice.
Okay, there's a cliffhanger. Right. Enjoy your day, Stephen, and enjoy your night, the rest of you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks for your
It's been a
talk.
pleasure to see you. Shame we're small, but that's how it is. Okay, hopefully bigger next time, because we're hoping to have what's their name again? I feel embarrassed. I should have remembered.
Yeah, I don't remember either.
It's Bonnie Brennan is going to be visiting us virtually and doing a presentation. Yeah, you know Bonnie, yeah?
Yeah, I've met her a few times.
Marvelous. Yeah, I've met her at a conference as well, actually. So she's quite a thoughtful person. She likes to share. She's very enthusiastic about the community, and I think it'll make a great meetup. Okay, cool. Anyway, you have a good one, guys.
Brilliant.
Yeah, cheers, guys.
Thanks very much.
Cheers. I'm going to stop presenting now, by the way. I should have done it ages ago. Cheers. All right. Have a good one.
Cheers, Tom. See you
All
later.
right. See ya.
Bye.
Bye.